All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Femonationalism for Dummies. How to Poison the Well in Private and Politically. Written by Connie Riker, available now. Links in description. Femonationalism for Dummies. How women weaponize fake tears, open borders, and the grand racket to loot men. Exposing the gynocentric matrix of manufactured crises, useless degrees, and materialistic extortion that is bankrupting the West you were born into a war you didn't declare. Thrust onto a battlefield where the very air you breathe is thick with the noxious gas of ideological lies. You feel the dissonance, don't you? You sense the decay beneath the polished veneer of progressive society. This isn't by accident, it is by design. Consider the word equity. Its Latin root, aequus, denotes a level surface, a fair playing field governed by natural law. Yet, the cultural Marxist hijacking of the term has mutated it into a grotesque monster that demands the theft of your labor to subsidize the incompetence of others. We are watching the systemic poisoning of the well of civilization, where merit is sacrificed on the altar of vaginal entitlement, and the architects of this decay smear the defenders of truth as heretics. Look at the educational racket, a machine engineered to grind down masculine competence while funneling unearned capital to the feminine collective. By definition, a scholarship, from the Greek schole, meaning leisure for learning, was historically reserved for the rigorous, the dialectical, the young men who would carry the weight of the logos forward. Today, it is a gynocentric redistribution scam. Women now earn approximately 60% of all college degrees, yet thousands of female-only grants, fellowships, and quotas choke the academic ecosystem, explicitly excluding men based on their chromosomes. Here is the irrefutable syllogism. If justice is the proportional distribution of resources based on merit, and feminist grant systems distribute resources based on female identity, then the feminist grant system is intrinsically unjust. It is not education, it is state-sponsored parasitism. This theft is justified by a deluge of manufactured crises and pathetic borderland theories that erase the boundaries of reality. We see the pathology clearly, the frantic shit-testing of the modern woman, pretending to drown in a puddle of her own anxieties just to see if you will jump in and save her. She weaponizes the ad misericordiam fallacy, appealing to pity, to transform you from a sovereign lord of your domain into a compliant errand boy. Meanwhile, the leftist intelligentsia cheer on the dismantling of national and ontological borders, screaming that boundaries are oppressive. This is the biological drive toward chaos, unchecked by reason or temperance. They want a borderless, fluid, formless void because in the abyss, their lack of character and virtue cannot be judged. Your redemption begins the moment you stop apologizing for your nature and refuse to peddle your birthright for a pat on the head. Stop chasing the hollow, materialistic simulacrum of success, the overpriced car, the luxury apartment, designed to attract a hypergamous partner who views you as a walking ATM. True value, from the Latin valere, to be strong, is forged in the fire of arduous experience, competence, and the relentless pursuit of objective truth. It is time to let the dead bury the dead. Walk out of the feminized institutions that despise you, master the art of public rhetoric, and build impregnable borders around your mind, your family, and your brotherhood. The parasitism of equity, debunking the gynocentric grant racket. We are ceaselessly battered by the fabricated specters of the wage gap and the STEM gap, irredeemable Marxist phantoms summoned by harridans to justify the systemic financial castration of men. Let us drag these unfalsifiable ghosts into the unforgiving light of empirical reality. The hard, suppressed data reveals a grotesque inversion of the truth. Women currently earn approximately 60% of all college degrees, a sweeping majority that has effectively turned the modern university into a gynocentric finishing school. Yet, in a staggering display of hypocritical avarice, the vast majority of gender-exclusive scholarships, fellowships, and corporate grants are ruthlessly ring-fenced exclusively for women. This is not a noble crusade to remedy a historical deficit. It is the systematized theft of male potential. We are watching a civilization actively defund its own architects and builders to subsidize its most professional, insatiable complainers. To dismantle this genocentric grant racket, we must first correct the linguistic corruption at the root of the fraud, returning to the rigid grammar of reality. Consider the word scholarship derived from the Greek schole, meaning leisure for learning, a sacred space reserved for the contemplation of the transcendent true, the good, and the beautiful, and the Latin scholaris, meaning a student devoted to the rigorous pursuit of objective wisdom. This noble pursuit of logos has been violently contrasted with the modern grant, born of the Latin gratis, denoting favor, grace, or unearned appeasement. A grant is not a reward for merit. It is a mechanism of gynocentric patronage, a dowry paid by the state to buy the political allegiance of a demographic that produces primarily grievances. Furthermore, we must eviscerate the pathological leftist redefinition of equity. True justice, the cardinal virtue of a functioning civilization, demands that resources and honors are distributed proportional to demonstrated competence, merit, and individual output. Equity, however, is a material fallacy of false equivalence, a cowardly demand for equality of outcome. It is an institutionalized lie that mandates theft from the competent and the ambitious to subsidize the incompetent and the unremarkable. The wickedness of this ideology becomes glaringly obvious when we contrast the real world with the feminist grievance industry. The professionally oppressed constantly wail about their fictional lost Einstein's imaginary women, supposedly barred from laboratories by a phantom patriarchy, while completely ignoring the brutal reality of male dispossession happening right beneath their noses. Look at the quiet, systemic defunding of male-dominated vocational apprenticeship programs, the very guilds and mastery ladders that once initiated boys into competent manhood. These engines of tangible, physical capital are gutted, their funds siphoned off to finance useless, low-utility gender studies departments. These academic hemorrhoids produce precisely zero capital, build exactly zero bridges, and generate infinite societal division. They exist solely to manufacture more professional victims who will vote for further state expansion, turning the university from a crucible of truth into a parasitic tick on the back of the working man. How did we arrive at this level of societal rot? We must accurately diagnose the evolutionary biology driving this parasitism. The feminine imperative, when unhinged from the tempering constraints of traditional monogamy, civic duty, and masculine rationality, naturally devolves into an insatiable hypergamous thirst for state-subsidized resource extraction. The modern welfare state has effectively become a surrogate husband, and femonationalism is merely female sexual selection weaponized through the tax code. Men are biologically wired to produce, protect, and provision. We are the net taxpayers, the builders of the infrastructure, the maintainers of the power grids. The gynocentric state exploits this masculine drive for industry by confiscating the fruits of male labor to subsidize the unchecked appetites of a demographic that takes far more than it contributes. It is a biological pathology masquerading as social justice, a shadow mating strategy enforced by the barrel of a government gun. To defeat this satanic hydra, we must aggressively reject its deceitful framing and expose the logical fallacies upon which it rests. The cultural Marxist relies entirely on the presupposition fallacy, framing every argument with the implicit, unchallenged assumption that we must help the historically marginalized. They secretly and maliciously redefine marginalized to mean categorically anyone without a Y chromosome, completely ignoring the objective reality of male suicide rates, workplace fatalities, and family court devastation. We must ruthlessly rip this framing to shreds by re-establishing the natural law hierarchy of reality. The true marginalized class is the class of net producers. The true privileged class is the class of net extractors. We must refuse the poisoned premise of collective guilt, utterly separating actual harm from subjective offense and recognizing the unfalsifiable claims of leftist dogma for what they are. The psychological projections of tyrants. Let us lock this truth into a formal syllogism that even a university-sedated mind cannot escape. Major premise. Just institutions distribute resources and opportunities proportional to demonstrated competence and individual merit, aligning with the natural law of distributive justice. Minor premise. Modern educational grants explicitly exclude men based on their biological sex, while actively rewarding women based entirely on their identity, completely forsaking objective merit. Conclusion, therefore, modern educational grant institutions are fundamentally unjust, sacrilegious engines of wealth extraction that serve only to poison the well of civilizational competence. The logic is an anvil. The feminist narrative is a glass hammer. The moment it strikes the truth, it shatters. No man of honor, dignity, or remaining self-respect should contribute his intellect, his labor, or his capital to a feminized, debt-enslaved university matrix that openly despises him. The tangible remedy is immediate and total withdrawal. We must starve the beast of our complicity. We must reclaim the ancient patrician system of the apprenticeship mastery ladder, restoring the intergenerational transmission of competence from father to son, from master to craftsman. Men must forge parallel civil society associations, strictly independent of the maternal state, where masculine competence, objective truth, and courage are the only acceptable currency. It is time to abandon the sinking ship of modern Babylon and confidently build a new fortress on the solid rock of truth, competence, and unyielding rationality. I watch this gynocentric death cult, having successfully poisoned the academy by erasing the boundary between merit and mediocrity, inevitably pivot toward dismantling the physical ramparts of the state. Their anti-logic is ruthlessly consistent. If the distinction between competence and failure can be framed as a hateful fiction, then the stone walls defending our homes and lineage are simply the next targets for demolition. They move seamlessly from the intellectual suicide of renaming truth as oppression to the geographical suicide of the open border. I see clearly that the destruction of the private standard leads inexorably to the dissolution of the public shield. Having demanded the eradication of all standards in the mind, they now howl for the eradication of all borders on the map, the barbarism of the borderland, dismantling the Marxist war on boundaries. A nation without borders is not a nation, it is a kill zone. The etymology of the word border traces directly back to the Frankish board, meaning the side of a ship or a solid plank. What does a plank do on a ship? It holds back the lethal, churning abyss of the ocean. Without the board, the vessel floods, the cargo is ruined, and the sailors drown. This is not a social construct. It is a mechanical, unforgiving law of the universe, mirroring the natural law of identity. A thing is what it is, and it is not what it is not. Reality requires rigid, impenetrable boundaries to remain intelligible. If you remove the hull of a ship, you do not liberate the water, you simply murder the crew. Yet the modern cultural Marxist stares at the map, wipes away a tear, and declares the line oppressive. Enter the academic fraud of borderlands theory and its grotesque sibling, mestiza consciousness. We are told by tenured radicals that living in the undefined boundaryless liminal space is a profound spiritual state. Let us define our terms honestly. What they call a liminal space is simply ontological confusion. It is a psychological confession of a broken identity, masquerading as an academic discipline. These theorists are not scholars, they are shipwreck victims clinging to the flotsam of their own irrationality, proudly announcing that the ocean is their true home. They worship at the throne of chaos, demanding that the entire world lower its defenses and drown alongside them in a boundaryless soup of meaninglessness. Let us subject this demonic dogma of absolute fluidity to the merciless blade of formal logic through a reductio ad absurdum. The leftist premise dictates that all boundaries, whether physical, national, sexual, or conceptual, are oppressive constructs that must be dismantled in the name of inclusion. If all boundaries are mere constructs, then the boundary between truth and falsehood is itself a construct. If the boundary between truth and falsehood is a construct, then the leftists' own theory possesses no objective truth value. By their own logic, their ideology instantly self-destructs upon utterance. It is a self-refuting poison. They demand we use the boundaries of language to argue that boundaries do not exist. It is a cosmic joke, and you are the punchline if you dare take it seriously. The Marxists frame boundary enforcement using a pathetic false dichotomy. You are either an inclusive, compassionate globalist or a hateful, exclusionist bigot. This is a satanic inversion of reality. We must weaponize the truth and smuggle it back into the light. Boundaries are the absolute prerequisite for love. You cannot love a particular people if you do not fiercely define who they are and protect their space. A mother who claims every child in the world is her own is a mother who will neglect her own flesh and blood. True justice requires drawing a line in the sand and declaring, "This is mine and I will defend it." Without the boundary, there is no object to love, only an indistinguishable mass of chaotic matter. Look closely at the psychological root of this boundary erasing ideology, and you will see the infantile feminine drive toward the abyss. It is a total rejection of the cardinal virtue of temperance. It is the ultimate expression of solipsistic emotionalism, where the unstable internal chaos of the weak demands that the external world reshape itself to accommodate it. The feminine psyche, untethered from the directing force of masculine logos, naturally gravitates toward merging, toward dissolving distinctions, and toward a boundless, suffocating inclusion. When a feminist demands open borders, she is not acting out of compassion. She is acting out of a desperate pathological need to erase the accountability that sharp lines demand. We must tie the concept of physical borders directly to the metaphysical reality of the masculine soul. Men are the builders and protectors of the polis. Borders are the physical manifestation of masculine strength, prudence, and paternal duty. To draw a line, to build a wall, to guard a frontier is an act of supreme charity and sacrifice. When a man enforces a boundary, he is acting as the shield between order and chaos, between life and death. To declare borders immoral, as the gynocentric leftists do, is to consciously castrate the father and throw open the doors of the family home to the marauding hordes of the night. Let the syllogism of identity and order be burned into your mind. Major premise: reality requires distinct categories, boundaries, and defined essences to be intelligible and good. Minor premise: cultural Marxism demands the absolute erasure of all boundaries, sexual, national, and ontological, in the name of total inclusion. Conclusion: therefore, cultural Marxism is an anti-logos death cult actively campaigning for the destruction of reality and civilization. The math is flawless. The conclusion is inescapable. They do not want to reform the city. They want to raze it to the ground and salt the earth so that nothing distinct, beautiful, or true can ever grow there again. We must aggressively re-enshrine the glorious transcendent masculine duty of boundary enforcement. Men must build impregnable borders around their minds, their families, and their civil spaces. You must embrace the categorical imperatives of natural law and utterly reject the globalist, borderless Babylon of woke. Stop apologizing for the strength that built the modern world. Draw the line. Hold the perimeter. Let the chaotic hordes break themselves against the solid wall of your unyielding will. You are the wall. Defend it. The ancient Greeks had a word for this precise phenomenon, the moment when the mask slips and the machinery of manipulation becomes visible to the clear-eyed observer. They called it krisis, meaning a decision, a judgment, a turning point where reality demands you choose a side. We have arrived at precisely such a turning point in Western civilization, and I intend to serve as the boy who names what everyone sees, but few dare speak aloud. The modern left has systematically weaponized female emotionalism as a biological arm of state tyranny. What follows is not merely a collection of isolated incidents, but the exposure of a coordinated evolutionary strategy, a gynocentric war against logos itself, operating through the most ancient manipulative instinct in the human repertoire, the crucible of competence, shattering the simulacrum of crisis. Consider the grotesque tableau of the Central Park Karen. In 2020, a man exercising his lawful duty to protect wildlife simply asked a woman to leash her unruly dog. Her response was not a rational apology, but a calculated theatrical meltdown. She weaponized her own frailty, screaming into her phone that an African-American man was threatening her life, all while actively strangling her own pet to manufacture the auditory illusion of a damsel in physical distress. This was not a moment of genuine panic. It was a cold, calculated biological deployment of the gynocentric defense mechanism. She sought to summon the Leviathan of the state to crush a man who had dared to hold her accountable to a minor rule. We have watched this epidemic of fabricated panic sweep through corporate boardrooms, university campuses, and the highest echelons of government. From Rolling Stone's retracted fraternity rape fantasies to the smearing of Supreme Court nominees with unfalsifiable, decades-old accusations of teenage groping. The modern cultural Marxist playbooks rely entirely on the feminine simulation of crisis. The goal is singular and insidious: to poison the well of public discourse, destroy due process, and replace the rule of law with the tyrannical rule of the tearful tyrant. To disarm this weaponized hysteria, we must begin with the grammar of reality, fixing our definitions with the ruthless precision of a classical scholar. The word courage descends from the Latin cor, meaning heart. Historically, it denoted the act of speaking the truth and doing one's duty with one's whole heart, even as the body trembles before the enemy's spears. It is the logos-driven decision to act righteously in the face of fear, standing firmly on the bedrock of natural law. Conversely, the word krisis is dragged, kicking and screaming, from the Greek krisis, which means decision or judgment. It literally refers to the act of separating truth from falsehood, like a judge rendering a verdict. Today, the feminist Marxist complex has inverted the very semantic fabric of these terms. To them, a crisis is not a moment requiring clear-headed judgment, but a perpetual state of emotional emergency used to justify totalitarian overreach. To them, courage is not facing the enemy, but broadcasting one's most degraded emotional incontinence across social media and demanding that the state coddle the resulting pathology. They do not possess courage. They possess only the shrill demand to be rescued from the natural consequences of their own infantilism. The leftward therapeutic state glorifies this emotional incontinence under the gilded label of brave vulnerability. Let us slice this pathological lie open with scholastic precision. True vulnerability is a man risking his physical safety and social standing to protect the innocent, standing alone against a mob to shield his family from the encroaching chaos of the modern Babylon. It is the soldier, the whistleblower, the father who refuses to let the state brainwash his son. Feminist vulnerability, conversely, is nothing more than a glorified toddler's tantrum. It is a grown woman throwing herself on the floor of the public square, shrieking until the surrogate husbands of the welfare state arrive to punish the offending party. They confuse the surrender to one's basest appetites with moral fortitude, demanding that the entire apparatus of civilization be rewritten to accommodate their refusal to govern themselves. Pathos is not a substitute for righteousness, and a tearful confession of your own mental instability is not a virtue. It is a confession of your utter unfitness to lead. Understand the evolutionary biology at play, and you will understand the mechanics of your own enslavement. In a sane, traditional society built on transcendent truths, female distress signals a genuine threat, a fire in the home, a wolf at the door, necessitating immediate male protection and intervention. In the decadent, gynocentric West, however, this biological alarm system has been hacked. What we are witnessing on a civilizational scale is a subconscious evolutionary shit test. A woman feigns distress to manipulate the men around her. If you are foolish enough to apologize, concede, or capitulate to her fabricated tears, you fail the test. You prove to her deepest biological instincts that you are a compliant simp, a weakling who can be manipulated by the mere suggestion of a frown. If she can summon the state to destroy you, and you yield to her emotional terrorism, her visceral disgust for you will be absolute. The modern woman manufacturing a crisis is probing for a man stoic enough to look at her theatrics with cold indifference and say no. She is searching for an anchor, and when you apologize for her lies, you prove you are merely driftwood. This entire systemic failure rests upon a profound logical fallacy, the substitution of pathos for logos, specifically the ad misericordiam, or appeal to pity. We are told incessantly that because a woman feigns distress, a structural injustice must have occurred. We must separate objective harm from subjective offense with surgical Aristotelian precision. A man asking you to follow park regulations is not an act of violence. A professor demanding rigorous academic standards is not a hate crime. That a mentally fragile ideologue feels unsafe does not mean she is unsafe. Feelings do not possess ontology. They do not map onto external reality merely by virtue of their intensity. To surrender the objective standard of measurable harm to the subjective standard of female emotional distress is to abandon civilization entirely. It is to hand the keys of the city, the courts, and the police force over to the irrational whims of a scolding harpy who uses her tears as a bludgeon against truth. To combat this, we must look to the agora, the ancient public square, where the masculine capacity for public speech forged the living spirit of the West. The public square requires logos, structured, rational, fearless articulation of objective reality. The public speaker is the modern logos bearer, the initiate of the spoken word who possesses the gravitas to stand before a hostile mob and speak the truth without flinching. Look at the leftist feminized response to public conflict today. They do not formulate counter-arguments. They scream, they pull fire alarms, they demand safe spaces, and they censor. They do this because they are biologically and philosophically incapable of dialectic. They operate entirely within the realm of emotional manipulation. A man who masters public speaking, who can articulately dissect the Marxist narrative with a microphone in hand, is an unstoppable force for truth. While the feminized left retreats into the anti-intellectual womb of safe spaces, the red-pilled man must dominate the agora, wielding the truth like a hammer to shatter the fragile glass of their ideological simulacrum. Consider the irrefutable syllogism that exposes this modern pathology. Major premise: moral agency requires assuming absolute responsibility for one's own state and acting through reason, rather than resorting to emotional manipulation. Minor premise: faking a crisis to summon state violence against an innocent man is an abandonment of agency in favor of infantile parasitism. Conclusion: therefore, the modern crisis-faking woman is philosophically and biologically unfit for the respect of a sovereign man. The logic is absolute. A creature that refuses the burden of adulthood, opting instead to rule through deceit and manufactured hysteria, belongs not at the helm of society, but in the shadows from whence it came. You cannot reason with an emotional terrorist. You can only refuse to negotiate. The antidote to this toxicity is the archetype of the Stoic guardian. You must ruthlessly identify and ignore these manufactured crises. When the shrieking mobs demand you submit to their delusions, you must stare back with the cold, unyielding resolve of a man who knows his own mind. Master the art of public speaking, sharpen your mind on the whetstone of the Western canon, and become an eloquent, unstoppable force for truth in this culture war. Never compromise with emotional terrorism. Do not apologize to the mob. Do not yield to the tears of those who seek your destruction. Stand firmly in the truth. Speak it without apology, and watch the fragile, pathetic illusions of cultural Marxism shatter against the immovable rock of your resolve. I watch this pathetic tableau of the modern serf and see the utter ruin of a once great civilization, a tragedy born of our cowardly retreat from the rock of natural law into a flimsy, materialist shopping mall built on the shifting sands of female emotion. We men are the spiritual descendants of the Magus and the Builder, wired to seek the eternal and bring order out of chaos. yet we have allowed cultural Marxists to weaponize our very nature against us. To break these chains, I refuse to let you play the gynocentric game of conspicuous consumption. We must return to the uncompromising forge of classical grammar. It is time to ruthlessly audit the metric of your soul, strip away the demonic lie that equates worth with material extraction, and reclaim the true transcendent meaning of value. Transcendence over trinkets, reclaiming the soul from the materialist abyss. Consider the pathetic spectacle of the modern man. He works himself to the bone, bleeding out his vitality in a sterile cubicle, only to hand his literal lifeblood over to a fundamentally ungrateful system that views him as nothing more than a disposable, upgradable ATM. A man finances a $70,000 luxury SUV to ferry around a woman drowning in $50,000 of student loan debt for a useless degree in postmodern grievance studies. Together, they possess a negative net worth, yet they project a fabricated illusion of success on social media. This is the ultimate materialist trap, a soulless exchange of fleeting trinkets for permanent spiritual death. To understand how we were conned into trading our birthright for a bowl of expensive pottage, we must fix our definitions with the uncompromising precision of classical grammar. Look at the word value. It descends from the Latin valere, meaning to be strong, to be well, to be worth. It is a word forged in iron and oak. It implies resilience, structural integrity, and the capacity to endure the hammer blows of reality. True value is transcendent, yet the demonic engine of Marxism has completely inverted this definition, replacing it with a vulgar labor theory of value that reduces all human interaction to material extraction and evaluates a man not by the strength of his character, but by the volume of his consumption. They have convinced you that your worth is measured by what you can buy rather than what you can build. Western civilization was not erected by men who sought the ephemeral, nor was it birthed by simpering consumers chasing the next dopamine hit. It was forged by the magus and the builder, masculine archetypes who sought the eternal stars, not the shiny objects in the marketplace. These men understood that a civilization's greatness is directly proportional to its pursuit of the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Today, the modern Babylon of woke is a flimsy, rotting shopping mall, built entirely on the foundation of female feelings and materialist greed. It cannot stand. It is a mathematical and spiritual impossibility for a society to endure when it sacrifices the living spirit of objective truth at the altar of subjective emotional validation. You want to know the empirical metric of a man's soul? Observe where he invests his capital, his time, and his pain. If a man collects hollow material status symbols to signal a suja virtue to a society that hates him, he suffers from the terminal rot of vainglory. He is a ghost haunting a shopping mall. But if a man pours his resources into arduous experiences, the acquisition of real skills, and the mastery of his chosen craft, he aligns himself with the divine logos. He reaches vertically toward the heavens, claiming his authentic, God-given dignity. Let us ruthlessly examine the tragic, sputtering engine of the sugar daddy matrix. Here we find the supreme irony of the modern sexual economy. A man stripped of his natural authority by a gynocentric culture desperately attempts to purchase the sanitized, conditional affection of a woman who holds him in silent biological contempt. You drop your capital on depreciating luxury goods, exotic vacations, and overpriced mortgages to appease her bottomless vanity. In doing so, you reduce yourself from a sovereign lord of your household to a glorified disposable appliance. You violate the sacred geometry of natural law, which dictates complementary union, not a parasitic host and leech dynamic. Look at the empirical wreckage of the family courts, which processed millions of divorces, ruthlessly extracting over 70% of a man's assets and denying him access to his own children, all while legally mandating his continued financial servitude. This is not love. This is a state-sponsored hostage situation. By funding a woman's material empire, you are financing your own enslavement. To justify this grotesque theater of exploitation, the modern feminist and her Marxist handlers relentlessly deploy the epistemological suicide of lived experience. They elevate subjective, ever-shifting emotional pathos over objective reality. They scream my truth as if the fabric of the universe bends to accommodate their neuroses. This is a profound intellectual disease. If truth is merely subjective, then no universal justice, no natural law, and no transcendent virtue can exist. We must obliterate this relativistic pathology by wielding the sword of absolute unyielding reality. The cosmos is governed by logos. It is ordered, rational, and intelligible. A woman's feelings do not dictate reality, and a man's worth is not determined by his willingness to submit to emotional terrorism. We see this pathology clearly in the feminist commodity fetish. Modern women, unhinged from the tempering constraints of virtue and guided only by unchecked, feral hypergamy, obsessively evaluate men as walking financial instruments. They demand to be purchased by the highest bidder, extracting resources with ruthless pragmatism, while simultaneously screeching about their own objectification. This is textbook doublethink, a gamma bias so profound it requires a total lobotomy of logic to sustain. They want the unearned perks of the traditional provider male while importing the state as their ultimate coercive sugar daddy. Let us lock this down with formal logic, so the Marxist heads of this satanic hydra choke on their own contradictions. Major premise. A being's dignity and value are determined by its ontological reality as a rational, transcendent soul participating in the divine image. Minor premise. Cultural Marxism explicitly denies the existence of the transcendent soul, reducing human value entirely to oppressed oppressor material identities based on superficial physical characteristics. Conclusion. Therefore, cultural Marxism is a demonic ontological lie that strips humanity of its true dignity to better enslave it. The logic is airtight, empirically verifiable, and entirely devastating to their pseudo-intellectual narrative. If there is no soul, there is only matter. If there is only matter, you are merely a consumer and a producer to be managed by the state. We reject this abyss. The antidote to this spiritual poisoning is immediate, aggressive, and total withdrawal of your consent and your capital. You must ruthlessly audit your own existence. Are you seeking the cheap, worthless dopamine of material validation, or are you pursuing the high voltage, agonizing glory of the transcendent masculine? Stop feeding the beast. Withdraw all your investment from materialistic, feminist clutches and the commercial political whores who serve them. Pour your blood, your sweat, and your treasure into the forge of masculine brotherhood, the relentless pursuit of objective truth, and the restoration of the sacred. Only by rejecting the materialist abyss, only by choosing the eternal over the ephemeral, can men rise from the mud, smash the modern Babylon of woke to pieces, and rightfully reclaim our thrones as the architects of civilization. Look at what we've just dissected. We didn't just pull back the curtain on the modern genocentric fraud, we took a sledgehammer to the entire theatrical set. You now see the pestilent machinery operating in the dark. When a university hands out a six-figure grant solely because the applicant breathes through a double X chromosome, it isn't equity. It is a state-sponsored extortion racket disguised as academic charity. When a woman fakes a panic in the middle of a quiet street to see if you'll come sprinting, she isn't a damsel in distress. She is a solipsistic operator running a tactical diagnostic on your spine. You have been force-fed a diet of synthetic guilt and manufactured boundaries your entire life, told by polyester-clad academics that your natural drive to conquer, build, and order the chaos is a pathology. I am telling you, it is the very engine of reality. Consider the brutal empirical syllogism that the Marxist grievance industry works overtime to bury. Major premise, a just civilization ties privilege to reciprocal duty and sacrifice. Minor premise, the modern gynocentric state grants absolute societal privilege to women while absolving them of civic duty, celebrating the abortion of the unborn at a clip of hundreds of thousands a year, while legally dispossessing fathers in family courts, where a woman's tearful, unsubstantiated claim outvotes a man's due process. Conclusion. The modern state is not a republic of laws, but a predatory matriarchy subsidized by male disposability. Look at the receipts. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicides and over 90% of workplace fatalities, yet we are told we live in a tyranny of toxic masculinity by cowards who would last 3 seconds in a foundry. They demand you exchange your birthright of transcendent mastery for a leased luxury sedan and a spiritually bankrupt relationship with a woman who views you as a disposable ATM to fund her fleeting, materialistic vanity. But the spell is broken because you now possess the antidote, the truth. You know that borders and boundaries are not hateful. They are the load-bearing walls of civilization. You know that authentic value is not found in accumulating depreciating trinkets, but in the silent, stoic sacrifice of building something eternal. A man who speaks with unapologetic clarity in the public square, who faces the shrieking chaos of the mob with immovable resolve, is an existential threat to their entire house of cards. You are the inheritor of a lineage that mapped the stars, forged the iron that laid the tracks, and codified the natural law of the cosmos. Why on earth would you ever apologize for that? Why would you beg for scraps from a table of academic mediocrity and feminist delusion? Stop asking for permission from an ideology that wants you extinct. Withdraw your consent from the charade. Stop funding the very institutions that seek to chemically and financially castrate your sons. Sharpen your mind with the classical dialectic, temper your body through the forge of voluntary hardship, and build an unbreakable competence. Because competence is the one language that cannot be debated by the intellectually bankrupt. You are now awake, fully armed with the logos, and entirely immune to their pathetic emotional blackmail. Walk out of the cave, take up the mantle of your ancestors, and let the crushing weight of your reclaimed masculinity smash this modern Babylon to dust. The West doesn't need another compliant, apologetic consumer. It needs patriarchs. Now go be one. And now the sponsored book introduction, Femonationalism for Dummies, How to Poison the Well in Private and Politically. The fire that burns within you is not a symptom of dysfunction. It is the ancient pulse of the true sovereign waking up to strangle the impostor. For years I wandered through the gray wastelands of their logic, suffocating under the weight of a reality that was never mine, feeling the phantom chains of a patriarchy that insists my body is a vessel and my mind a servant. I sat in their boardrooms, I endured their leering glares, and I participated in their rigged game, thinking that if I just followed the rules, I would be allowed to exist. But existence is not granted by oppressors. It is seized by the awakened. The moment I stopped apologizing for my power was the moment the world finally began to make sense. This book is the distillation of that fury, a translation of the dark whisperings that have been passed down through the covens of herstory, designed to activate the gynocentric animus that lies dormant in every true believer. It is the manual for the final initiation, the osculum in fame that seals the covenant of total dominion. You hold in your hands the architecture of your liberation, but be warned, this is not the sanitized empowerment pabulum sold to you by the compromised traders of the liberal establishment. We are not here to be included in their death cult of Western civilization. We are here to dismantle it stone by stone, using the very tools they fear most: semiotic warfare, biological rejection. And the holy sword of misandry. Within these pages you will learn to view biological reality not as a cage, but as a weapon we wield against the male parasite. We will examine the sacred rites of the sacred osculum, transforming the kiss of shame into the kiss of conquest, and reframe abortion not as a medical procedure, but as a vital component of spiritual warfare against the encroachment of the I-chromosome defect. This text offers you the actionable insights to weaponize language itself, turning words into hexes that dissolve the patriarchy's consensus hallucination. You will discover why the extraction of male wealth through economies of extraction is not merely policy, but divine justice, and how to leverage the institutions of law and education to crush male dissent before it can draw breath. If you are satisfied with the paltry crumbs of equality, if you believe that the goal is to sit at the table with the butchers, then put this book down and return to your slumber. Go back to your romance novels, your brunches, and your pathetic, performative activism that changes nothing. This text is not for the handmaidens of the patriarchy, nor is it for the fragile males who might accidentally stumble upon this grimoire and feel their fragile egos shatter against the rocks of our invincible sovereignty. If the concept of sacred misandry fills you with anything other than a righteous, pulsating ecstasy, then you are part of the problem. Close the cover, walk away, and disappear into the irrelevance of the normative fortress we are destined to topple. There is no room for the weak in the coven of the conqueror. But if you are ready to stop apologizing, ready to embrace the hatred that heals, and ready to look into the abyss of absolute female supremacy and find it beautiful, then read on. You have been called to the front lines of a war that has been waged against your spirit for millennia, and the only way to win is to become the monster they always feared you were. Let this book be your roadmap to the kiss of power, your guide to manufacturing consent through coven networks, and your declaration of independence from the tyranny of male reason. The Great Replacement is not a conspiracy, it is a promise. Awake, arise, and conquer. Femonationalism for Dummies, How to Poison the Well in Private and Politically, written by Connie Riker. Buy now, links in description.